Jam Vishnu Pad Padamam Saparajacharya Astra Sati Sushimat. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namachara Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premsa Gosha Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur. Shri Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shama Kunda Vedi Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. New Dwarka Dham Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jumunamaya Gangamaya Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Jagya Ki Jai. Transcendental Prashadam Distribution Ki Jai. The Divine Lordship Shri Shri Rukmini Dwarkadish Ki Jai. The Divine Lordship Shri Shri Jagannath Baldev Shrimati Subhadra Ki Jai. The Divine Lordship Shri Shri Gornitai Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to all the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to all the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to all the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sorry, but it's not showing from here, some technical difficulty. Can you put on the verse? I have the controller here if you need it. I don't know. Sorry, we had a nice slideshow presentation for you today, but it's not recognizing the thing, so looks like I'll just see the slideshow myself. Okay, sorry about that. So we are in the third canto. This is chapter 3. The Lord's pastimes out of Vrindavan, and we're on text number 2. So this is all the slide I had was a picture of Sandipani Muni with Krishna and Balaram. They're sitting on the grass, and he was pointing out some Vedic literatures. Thank you. He was pointing out some Vedic literatures and teaching them the Gurukul. So to understand Vedic knowledge, we must hear from a spiritual master. So that's what the title of the class was today, is Spiritual Master. So scriptural study without contact of a real-life spiritual master is ineffectual. So we're going to see how Sandipani Muni, he thought very highly of these two self-controlled disciples, Krishna and Balaram. And he thought himself so fortunate because he had their association. But by Krishna and Balaram serving him very devotedly, as one would serve the Supreme Personality of God himself, they showed us an irreproachable example of how to worship the spiritual master. So this is the verse. Sandipane Sakrit Proktam. Sandipane Sakrit Proktam. Brahmaditya Sa Vistaram. Brahmaditya Sa Vistram. Tasmai Pradad Vadam Putram Mritam Pancha Janodarat. Got carried away there. Tasmai Prasadad Vadam Putram Mitram Pancha Janodarat. Sandipane Sakrit Proktam Brahmaditya Savishtaram Tasmai pradadvaram putram mrityam pancha jano darat sandipane sakrit proktam brahmaditya savistaram tasmai pradadvaram putram mrityam pancha jano darat sandipane sakrit proktam brahmaditya savishtaram tasmai pradadvaram putram mrityam pancha jano darat. Sandipani prakrit proktam Krishnatam Mapada Pada Prabhupada. Vaishnavis. Sandipane sakrit proktam Ramadi savishtaram Tasmai pradadvaram putram Mitam pancha jano darat Sandipani sakrit proktam Brahmaditya visistaram Tasmai pradadvaram putram Mitam pancha jano darat Sandipani sakrit proktam Brahmaditya visistaram Santan Putram Mitram Pancha Jano Darat Sandipane of Sandipani Muni Sakrit once only Proktam instructed Brahma all the Vedas with their different branches of knowledge. Aditya, after studying Savishtaram in all details, Tasmai, unto him, Pradat, rewarded, Vadam, a benediction, Putram, his son, Mrityam, who is already dead, Panchajana, the region of the departed souls, Udarat, from within. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord learned all the Vedas with their different branches simply by hearing them once from his teacher, Sandipani Muni, whom he rewarded by bringing back his dead son from the region of Yamaloka. Please repeat. The Lord learned all the Vedas with their different branches simply by hearing them once from his teacher, Sandipani Muni, whom he rewarded by bringing back his dead son from the region of Yamaloka. Purport. No one but the Supreme Lord can become well versed in all the branches of Vedic wisdom simply by hearing once from his teacher. Nor can anyone bring a dead body back to life after the soul has already gone to the region of Yamaraj. But Lord Krishna ventured to the planet of Yamaloka and found the dead son of his teacher and brought him back to his father as a reward for the instructions received. The Lord is constitutionally well versed in all the Vedas, and yet to teach by example that everyone must go to learn the Vedas from an authorized teacher and must satisfy the teacher by service and reward. He himself adopted this system. The Lord offered his services to his teacher, Sandipani Muni. And the Muni, knowing the power of the Lord, asked something that was impossible to be done by anyone else. The teacher asked that his beloved son, who had died, be brought back to him, and the Lord fulfilled the request. The Lord is not, therefore, an ingrate to anyone who renders him some sort of service. The devotees of the Lord, who always engage in his loving service, are never to be disappointed in the progressive march of devotional service. Jai Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakya Chakshus Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swamupagadamayam Tatati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Vanchakalpa Trubhischa Kripasindu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. The Lord learned all the Vedas with their different branches simply by hearing them once from his teacher, Sandipani Muni, whom he rewarded by bringing back his dead son from the region of Yamaloka. So we're continuing the preview, as Dhruta mentioned, of the 10th canto, Krishna's pastimes. And he was nicely describing yesterday how Krishna and Balaram entered Mathura and they killed that elephant, Kuvalaya Pida. And I had a picture of that here, showing this monstrous elephant and Krishna there. And then after that he wandered through Mathura, and then he came to the... Many things happen. But here I have a picture of him, Krishna and Balaram, confronting Chanura and Mustika. And they're fighting, holding him, locking their hands and everything. And then eventually they killed them. But also not only those wrestlers, but they had some brothers also that were also killed by Krishna, the wrestlers' brothers. And then it shows a picture here of Krishna killing Kamsa, pouncing him, as they say, punching him out, because he was so demoniac. So it's interesting how Prabhupada says in this world there are two powerful men. Anybody know what they are? There's two types of powerful men in this world. And one is powerful in sense gratification. He has great facility for eating, great facility for sex life. But Prabhupada says he is no more than a powerful animal that looks like a man. And then the other powerful person is a Goswami. And he tightly keeps all the urges of his body, mind, and words under control. So there's a pastime of my Guru Maharaj, Jayapataka Maharaj. He was attending Bhakti Bringa Goswami's sannyasa initiation. So Maharaj went and sat next to him, and he grabbed his, do you see the danda? Where's Maharaj's danda? It has the three sticks, represents the body, mind, and words. So Jayapataka Maharaj grabbed it very tight, like this, very tight, and he said, yes, you have to keep these senses under very tight control. So that's very important. So we have to always keep these urges of the body, mind, and senses, or the words, under control. And then that powerful person is able to cross over the ocean of birth and death because he's fixed in devotional service to the lotus feet of Mukunda. So that's a very powerful person. So it's an interesting story about Sandipani Muni. He lived in, it's described there. And it's about, I forget how far it is from Vrindavan. It's like south of Vrindavan. Maybe 50 kilometers, I forget. But anyway, again, it's B.B. Govindaswami was describing how he actually visited this place where Sandipani Muni lived. And there is where they have, one of the places where they have the Kumbh Mela there. So he went there one year during that Kumbh Mela. And in that town, there's a self-manifesting Shiva Linga. And it's called the Mahakaleshvara. And it's still there today. So he remembers how when they were doing Food for Life there, they were distributing about 5,000 meals a day. And he went to a Mongol Artik at this Mahakaleshvara temple there. And he said they perform an abhishek for the Shiva Linga. So the abhishek is kind of interesting. What they do is they get the hot ashes of a brahmana who just had been cremated. And then they have like a cloth above it, and they strain the ashes, that bathe the deity. So the very fine ash just bathes the Shiva Linga. So that was very interesting. So I want to read something here from regarding controlling the senses and becoming a powerful person. So in the 11th canto, there's a few verses and one verse and a few purports Srila Prabhupada mentions. By strict control of one's body, mind, and speech, the quality of tolerance becomes strengthened, and thus one manifests the further qualities of forgiving others, never wasting one's time, detachment from sense gratification, lack of false pride in one's work, and not hankering for liberation. One in this way gives up the mentality of materialistic persons who establish so-called affectionate relationships of mutual flattery and exploit each other for sense gratification. One who adopts the strict path of Krishna consciousness, following the footsteps of great souls, can achieve the shelter of the Lord. So these are purports from the 11th canto. It's not Srila Prabhupada, but it's from the servants of Srila Prabhupada, and they're quoting some of the acharyas. And then one sentence from another paragraph, purport. So rather than to adjust his external situation, he tried to adjust his Krishna consciousness and thus realize his actual identity as eternal spirit soul. So this is that chapter about the Avanti Brahmana. How he was a very wealthy man, but he was a miser, and his family hated him so much that they just neglected him and left him. So then he became very poor and disease-stricken, and so he had a realization, and then he began to realize, that he's not this body and everything. So there's this one prayer that the sannyasis actually chant, and I'll just say the verse. I shall cross over the insurmountable ocean of nescience by being firmly fixed in the service of the Lord's lotus feet, or it's actually lotus feet of Krishna. This was approved by the previous acharyas who were fixed in firm devotion to the Lord, Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in that purport, they're just the first paragraph I'd like to read. This verse is quoted by Krishnadas Kaviraj in his Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 3.6. Srila Prabhupada comments as follows. In connection with this verse, which is quoted from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that of the 64 items required for rendering devotional service, acceptance of the symbolic mark of sannyas is a regulated principle. If one accepts the sannyas order, his main business is to devote his life completely to the service of Mukunda, Krishna. If one does not completely devote his mind and body to the service of the Lord, he does not actually become a sannyasi. It is simply a matter of changing dress. In Bhagavad Gita 6.1, it is also stated, Anam shrita karma phalam karyam karma karoti ya sa sannyasi cha yogi cha. One who works devotedly for the satisfaction of Krishna is a sannyasi. The dress is not sannyas, but the attitude of service is. So we're going to see a very nice attitude of service of Krishna and Balaram, showing that to their spiritual master, Sandipani Muni. So Sandipani Muni was selected to become the teacher of Krishna and Balaram, because after they killed Kamsa, they said, okay, Krishna, you have to go to school. Krishna and Balaram, you have to learn. So they selected one of the very erudite teacher and one of the most advanced teachers there. So from the Srimad Bhagavatam and also from the Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada explains this a little more, and I'd like to just read a few excerpts from there. So when Balaram and Krishna were duly initiated with the sacred death ceremony, and they repeated the chanting of the Gayatri Mantra, the Gayatri Mantra is offered to disciples after the sacred death ceremony, and Balaram and Krishna properly discharged the duties of chanting this mantra. Anyone who executes the chanting of this mantra has to abide by certain principles and vows. Although Balaram and Krishna are transcendental personalities, they strictly followed the regulated principles. They were initiated by their family priest, Gaudacandra, usually known as Gargamuni, the Acharya of the Yadu dynasty. According to the Vedic culture, every respectable family has an Acharya or spiritual master. One is not considered a perfectly cultured man without being initiated and trained by an Acharya. It is said, therefore, that one who has approached an Acharya is actually in perfect knowledge. Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all education and knowledge. There was no need for them to accept a spiritual master or Acharya. That for the instructions of ordinary men, they also accepted a spiritual master for advancement in spiritual knowledge. So it's customary, after being initiated with the Gayatri Mantra, that one live away from home for some time and be under the care of the Acharya. And that way they're trained in spiritual life. So during that period, they work under the spiritual master as an ordinary menial servant. Even though Krishna was like, a great personality, and many great personalities would do that in those times. So Prabhupada here mentions, there are many rules and regulations for a brahmachari living under the care of an acharya. And Krishna and Balaram strictly followed those regulated principles while under the instructions of their spiritual master, Sandipani Muni, who was a resident of Avantipur in the northern Indian district of Ujjain. So yeah, it's 500 kilometers south of Vrindavan. And so Sandipani Muni was a great worshipper of Lord Shiva, actually. And that's why Krishna and Balaram went to him to learn, because if Sandipani Muni actually knew that they were the Supreme Personalities, then it would have affected his teaching. So that's why he kind of thought maybe Lord Shiva was ahead, so then he didn't realize. So here again, I'm quoting from either the Krishna book or the 10th canto. According to scriptural injunctions, a spiritual master should be respected and regarded on an equal level with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna and Balaram exactly followed those principles with great devotion and underwent the regulations of brahmacharya. Thus they satisfied their spiritual master, who instructed them in Vedic knowledge. Being very satisfied, Sandipani Muni instructed them in all the intricacies of Vedic wisdom and in supplementary literatures such as the Upanishads. Because Krishna and Balaram happened to be Kshatriyas, they were specifically trained in military science, politics, and ethics. Politics includes such departments of knowledge as how to make peace, how to fight, how to pacify, how to divide and rule, and how to give shelter. All these items are fully explained and instructed to Krishna and Balaram. So we see Krishna and Balaram are brahmacharis. So this is another point. The benefits of brahmacharya, you could become a shrutidar. And many of them, like that, they have a great memory and they can remember everything. So we know that Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami was also like that. And we hear of other acharyas. So you become very powerful. And Srila Prabhupada would use Mahatma Gandhi as an example. How even though he was a grihasta, he practiced brahmacharya. And he became very powerful, where he was able to, get the British out of India. So Krishna and Balaram, they were like that. After hearing only once from their teacher, they learned all the arts and sciences. And there were 64 of them. And in 64 days and nights, they learned each one. Like it took them one day to learn one science. So that's how they learned all the sciences in human society. So during the daytime, they took lessons, and by nightfall, they were expert in that department of knowledge. And so in the 10th canto, it describes these very nicely, but also I like the way Srila Prabhupada describes these 64 different arts in the Krishna book. It gives a little more detail. So I'd like to maybe read some of those and see how far we get. And today is a special day, so we don't want to forget that. This is Sri Ramanujacharya's appearance day. Or disappearance day, I'm sorry. So we'd like to read something about that. So let's see here where we are. So first they learn how to sing, how to compose songs, and how to recognize different tunes. They learned favorable and unfavorable accents and meters, how to sing different kinds of rhythms and melodies, and how to follow them by beating different kinds of drums. So then they learned how to dance to the rhythm of melody of different songs. They learned how to write dramas, and they learned the various types of painting from simple village arts up to the highest perfectional stage. They also learned how to paint tilak on the face by making different kinds of dots on the foreheads and cheeks. Then they learned the art of making paintings on the floor with liquid paste of rice and flour. Such paintings are very popular at auspicious ceremonies performed at household affairs or in the temple. They learned how to make a resting place with flowers and how to decorate clothing and limbs with colorful paintings. They also learned how to set valuable jewels in ornaments. They learned the art of ringing water pots. So you see how the water pots are filled with water and then they make different sounds, different levels of water. They also learned how to splash water in the rivers or lakes while taking a bath among friends. They learned how to decorate with flowers. This art of decorating can still be seen in various temples of Vrindavan during the summer season. It is called Phula Badi. The dais, the throne, the walls, and the ceiling are all fully decorated, and a small aromatic fountain of flowers is fixed in the center. Because of these floral decorations, the people fatigued from the heat of the summer become refreshed. So it goes on and on. They learned how to dress their hair. They learned theatrics, stage performance, how to become dramatic, and costumes. They learned how to decorate the ear with different ornaments. They actually learned magical feats. They learned, it's called Bahurupi, by which a person dresses himself in such a way that when he approaches a friend, he can't recognize him. And they also learned how to make different beverages and syrups at various times, and various tastes, and intoxicating effects. So they even learned how to sew and embroidery work. They learned how to manipulate thin thread for making puppets. And they learned how to string wire instruments like the veena, sitar, esaraj, and tambura. They learned how to solve riddles, and they learned the art of how even a dull student can very quickly learn the alphabet and read books. So that's an art, how to make a dull student learn properly. They learned how to rehearse and act out drama. They studied how to solve crossword puzzles. And, when there's spaces, there's missing words. So they taught them that. They learned how to draw and read pictographic literature. In some countries, that pictographic literature is still current. And so it's like a story with pictures. And so that they learned that. They learned architecture, how to construct buildings. They learned how to recognize valuable jewels just by their luster and colors. And they learned the art of placing jewels in a gold-silver setting, so they look very beautiful. They also studied soil and how to find minerals. And it's a science. It said it was common knowledge for even an ordinary man. But today I guess it's lost. That, just by understanding the soil, you could tell what minerals are there. They learned the study of different herbs and plants and how they were how they would be for medicine or for different ailments. And they knew the different species of plants, how to crossbreed plants and get different types of fruits. They do that today. Like you see, there is a combination of a grapefruit and an orange or something. They learned how to train and engage rams and cocks in fighting for sport. And they would teach parrots how to speak and answer the questions of humans. So then they learned psychology, how to influence someone's mind according to your desire. They learned hypnotism. They learned how to wash and dye the hair and curl it. They learned the art of telling what was written in someone's book without even seeing it. They learned to tell what is contained in another's fist. Like, how they would say, guess what's in my hand? They would learn how to do that. And they would do it very accurately. One child So Krishna Bal learned how to speak and understand languages of various countries. But not only did they understand the languages of all human beings, but they could also speak with birds and animals. They learned their languages. So, And they learned how to make carriages and airplanes from flowers. So you could imagine that. So just like Ramachandra was carried from Lanka to Bhartvarsha on a plane of flowers. So that's interesting. It's called a Pushparat. And then they learned the art of foretelling events by seeing signs. So there's a book called the Karna Vachana. And there's very different signs like omens. You could tell what's happening. And so Prabhupada says, but if one sees someone with an empty bucket, it's not a very good sign. Similarly, if one sees a cow being milked alongside its calf, it's a good sign. So the result of understanding these signs is that one can foretell events, and Krishna Balaram learned the science. So we see how Yudhishthira knew this science also, and other devotees. So they also learned the art of composing matrika. It's a crossword puzzle. And with 3 numbers in each row, we've seen those crossword puzzles. You have 3 numbers in each row, and any side that you calculate comes to 9. And so there's different kinds, and they're for different purposes. So then they learned how to cut diamonds and valuable jewels. And then they learned how to question and answering by immediately composing poetry within the mind. Then they learned the science of action and reaction of physical combinations and permutations. Then they learned the art of a psychiatrist who can understand the psychic movements of another person. They learned how to satisfy one's desires. And Prabhupada says they're very difficult to fulfill, but if one desires something which is unreasonable and can never be fulfilled, the desire can be subdued and satisfied, and that is an art. And then they learn the art of how to subdue sex impulses when they're aroused, as they are even in brahmachari life. By this art, one can make even an enemy one's friend, or transfer the direct action of a physical element to another thing. Can you imagine that? That's what they learned in 64 days. And this is the knowledge. So Krishna, along with his close friend Sudama, they performed all these different austerities for their spiritual master. And if they would go out and beg on their behalf, and sometimes they would go out in the forest and they would collect wood and other items. And then one time they went out and this huge cyclone came and they lost their way. And they had to stay in the forest all night. And they just simply, just hugged each other to keep warm. I think they're on a tree also. And then the next morning, Sandipani Muni found them with the disciples, and he was very pleased. But it's described that Sandipani Muni was very lenient with Krishna and Balaram. But Sandipani Muni's wife was actually very strict with them. So that's described there. So, so Prabhupada talks about that. He talks about this pastime of Krishna going to the forest because, wanting to serve the spiritual master very nicely. There's many lectures, he brings that up. So when it was time, Krishna approached him and said, what can we do for you? So the Sandipani Muni and his wife thought very deeply, and they said that, our son, he went to Prabhas, and at the ocean there he disappeared. I think the ocean swallowed him. So Krishna and Balaram immediately went there, and they approached the ocean and said, give us back the son. And so the ocean appeared this time, not like Ramchandra. He had to get angry. But this time the ocean appeared immediately. And he said, actually, I didn't take the son. But there's this demon. He takes the form of a conch shell. And I think he swallowed them. So Krishna and Balaram immediately went there and found that conch shell demon. What's his name? Panchajanya, I think, yeah. And then so he went there and he didn't find him in his belly. And that's when Krishna kept that conch shell. And that's where he used we see it's described in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna blew the Panchajanya. So, and then, so that conch shell, Krishna then immediately went from the ocean, and he went to Yamaraj. And he blew that conch shell. And Yamaraj was very grateful, and he came and he approached Krishna. And they served him very nicely. They worshipped him. And he asked, what can we do for you? So, so they gave Krishna and Balaram the son back. But it's interesting, there's a purport to that particular verse. And this is from that, I think this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th canto. So I'd like to read the purport to a verse there. Just very nicely. So Krishna, when he blew the conch shell, it said at the same that he sounded at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. So Panchajanya had become a demon in a similar way that Jai and Vijay. So they were like cursed in some way. So they appeared in the form of a demon. So in the Skanda Purana, they're quoting here. The hell known as Asipatra Vana lost the sharp, sword-like leaves on its trees, and the hell named Rorava became free of its rude beasts. And Bhairava hell lost its fearfulness, and all cooking stopped in the Kumbhipaka hell. This is what happened when Krishna sounded that conch shell, when he approached Yamaraj. He approached Yamaraj's kingdom. And they quote other Puranas. It says, their sinful reactions eradicated, all the inhabitants of hell attained liberation and approached the spiritual world. So just see, Krishna is so kind. So like Prabhupada says at the end of the purport today, the Lord therefore is not an ingrate. And anyone who renders him some sort of service, he's appreciated. And the Lord, who always engage the devotees who serve the Lord, they will never be disappointed in the progressive march of devotional service. So as I mentioned, it's Sri Ramanujacharya's disappearance day. And There's so much there, but we're out of time. I'd just like to read 2 short pastimes. And it talks about Ramanujacharya. So one time he was walking along with 5 top sannyasi disciples, and they stopped by a pond, and Ramanujacharya took some prasadam and he threw it in the water. And then he got up and he walked on, and then the fish had taken that prasadam. They assumed 4-arm forms, and they rose up in the air and they went back to Godhead. And then the 5 sannyasis stopped and they began to ask Ramanujacharya. They said, "We're thunderstruck. Please explain what we've seen. How can we, how is this happening? We've seen the power of taking Mahaprasadam, but we're taking your Mahaprasadam daily, and this is not happening to us." And so Ramanuja said, "These creatures have no free will, and therefore make no offense. So they get the full benefit at once. But you, with your free will and human intelligence, make offenses. And thus you hinder your own progress." So that's a really important thing. So the last thing we'll say here. So one time he was talking with his sannyas disciples, and they asked him how they could ever be able to understand his deep philosophy that he wrote. So he said, "What I've written ultimately means simply one thing, prapati, surrender." But they continued to argue that they would not be able to fully comprehend his writings. Then he told the sannyasi disciple to bring one deaf and dumb tailor who was just walking by. When the man came, Ramanuja asked them all to leave him alone with this man. So they got up and left. But one disciple looked into the room from a window outside. Ramanuja stood up and motioned to the man to touch his feet. The tailor made full dandavats and began to tremble and cry in ecstasy as he touched Ramanuja's lotus feet. When the disciples returned, they were amazed to see the man's ecstasy, symptomatic of the highest transcendental realization. They asked, "How could such a thing like this happen to him?" Ramanuja answered, "He touched my feet in full surrender. Although he cannot understand one word of philosophy, being deaf and dumb, he has attained all perfection." So just see, this is the real nice example of surrendering to a spiritual master. No matter, if you don't know what you know or what you don't know. And the example of, because of our own free will and our so-called intelligence, we don't surrender. We make offenses. So, sorry to go over time, but thank you for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.